All right, everyone, welcome back to Full Circle with Joyce. This morning, of course, we want to talk about the crisis looming in our country, from agriculture to fuel prices, health, and even our businesses. It seems that things are quite tough in Kenya today, tough economic times, and that's what we want to discuss in studio. Joining me on the show, I have Steve Kwe, who's a financial analyst. Karibu sana to the show. I also have with me Alex Mwadi, who's an economist, author, and business leader as well. Karibuni sana to the show. All right, so let's look a bit. Let's look at some of the context behind this discussion. Of course, our economy has not been generating enough to pay, number one, for our debt service, wages. We've been borrowing heavily, as we've seen all the different memes about the number of loans that are being taken just to handle day-to-day business for government. And in many ways, it's that is also a reflection of the state of individuals and businesses. Lots of people also facing quite a severe cash crunch, having to borrow funds or, sell their assets. What is happening, and how does one begin to survive in such an economic context? Steve.
Well, thank you very much, Joyce. I think first off, if you master your money, then it works for you. If your behavior changes when you get money, then you haven't mastered your money. So that is what is happening with our government currently. We're borrowing too much and we cannot account for every penny. Secondly, we're supposed to be as an individual, you're supposed to be very territorial with your money. Guard it by all means because you work for it. Thirdly, you're supposed to be very intentional when you get your money. And that will lead me to talk about budgeting, saving, insurance, and investments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have the budget, and it keeps getting bigger and bigger every year. We see all these nice plans and manifestos. So for you, this boils down to, but clearly something is still off, right? Because I think we're great planners, but terrible implementers.
We don't know how to implement stuff. we don't.
But there needs to be a point where even as Kenyans, we are so frustrated by that because we're still paying taxes.
True.
Right? And so if you're not doing your job implementing, you should exit and allow the ones who can implement to do it. Alex?
The question I ask when you say there is a crisis in Kenya is, I ask which crisis? There's nothing new under the sun. And I'm just not quoting the Bible. 1992, we have structural adjustment programs where the dollar jumped from 35 to 70 shillings. So that means that the shilling was devalued by over 100%. And over the next 3-4 years, we talked about crisis. And after the election, it was crisis, 2002. Then there was a boom that was brought in by the former President Kibaki, and there was a boom. So the point is a cycle that keeps repeating itself. And the bottom line is not for us to panic or to start thinking that things are so bad for this country. It's for us to, as a country, as members of this country, to find out which is the best way to move forward. And the way to move forward is to really take responsibility for our lives. One, we are the ones who elect the people that we keep harping about. We're so quick in the social media to criticize them, to talk about them. And that's answering your question, that it's time that we stopped and started thinking, what do we do in the next lot of government? Do we elect populists, or do we elect people that have done something in their lives that can show what they can do, and then hope that when they take the nation, they will do what they say they have done? At the moment, we can cry as much as we want, but the situation will remain the same. We still have a 3 trillion shillings budget.
A trillion of which is lost in corruption.
Exactly. Not in corruption, misused. Of the 3 trillion, 1 trillion is stolen, basically, wasted. In the 2 trillion, that's where corruption is.
In the 2 trillion.
So as you start off, 1 trillion is lost. So, but that can only be done by prudent people that can be able to do what needs to be done, so that they're thinking more of what they can do for the people as opposed to what they can do for themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do we get out of this situation? Let's start nationally. What would be your analysis, Steve, as far as what are our options as a country? Like, if you were to advise government today, they were sitting in this room and whatever you say is going to happen, what would be some of the first steps that you would suggest that need to be taken?
Well, first of all, as a person, as a people, we pay our taxes. So one is we need to be accountable. The government needs to account for the taxes that we pay. There should be service delivery. You see, countries like Belgium, they pay among the highest taxes. We pay, I think, tops 30%. The people who pay the highest. Belgium, I think, pays over 50. But they get the services, the normal basic services delivered to them. So we start by accounting for the taxes Kenyans are paying, and then narrow the debt. We must not survive on debts. When we keep borrowing, we think we have money. We don't really have money. And we borrow, the government is not repaying as stipulated within the contracts of borrowing. So it comes back to us as Kenyans to keep now coughing more money, which gets disappearing every now and then,
Right.
because of corruption. People are greedy for money.
So how do we, what if you were to advise government today, as far as what are some of the first steps that Kenya needs to be taking to correct this path that we're on?
We need to account for the taxes we're paying.
Taxes.
Taxes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What about for you, Alex?
It's very simple. It's a simple word: stop wastage. If you stop wastage, you'll have 1 trillion shillings to spend on development or whatever else you want to do.
So where
1
is
trillion
this money
shilling
being
would
wasted?
ensure that that you pay your debt without even having to borrow. And also demystify this whole theory of that when you borrow a lot, that's when you have a problem. It is not true. The measure of borrowing for countries is based on the GDP, the percentage of that borrowing vis-a-vis the GDP. In Kenya, we are at the point of 54%. Japan today is 120%. We are, I think, 56th country in the world, which means in terms of that ratio, from an economic point of view, we are not doing badly. The issue is that when you borrow that money, what do you do with it? And just stop wastage.
Yeah.
And wastage is in every sense. A CES in this country normally have a chase car driving around, 2 or 3 of them depending on what position you're in. Every government office has flowers. You don't have flowers in private offices, and you are paid sometimes more than the people that are there. We do much more in terms of returns on an hourly basis, but you don't have those kind of things. So stop wastage. If you ask me what I could tell the government today, this morning, just stop wastage. If they stop wastage, 1 trillion shillings will be available for investment in this country.
So it's all these
on
little
day
perks
one.
you're saying.
Yes,
The
and there are many
chase
things.
cars, the what?
Why would somebody have a convoy of 3-4 cars following him? Why would I be elected a member of parliament and immediately I need 2 policemen in my car? Immediately I need a couple of policemen in my home. Why would I need all that? Have I become a thug or a thief because I've become a member of parliament or because I've been appointed into government? I'm picking up some of the wastages, but these are the very basic. Then as you go up, of course, there's a lot more wastage. When you're buying cars, you get your tenders. You give a contract to someone else as opposed to going to Toyota Kenya and buying the car. You want a Mercedes Benz. Why do you buy from Didi Dobi? Or why do you buy from an agent of Didi Dobi? Go to Didi Dobi or go to Mercedes Benz. They will sell you the car directly. We import cars. The government need to realize that there's a level of wastage. And talking about taxes, the other thing that I keep saying that we all look at the income tax that we are taxed, which is about 30%. We forget that 80% of the goods that we consume are imported. So 80% of the goods attract 25% duty. So when you're going to buy a shirt, you're going to buy a shoe, you're going to buy whatever, you've already paid 25% tax on that. You pay 16% VAT. You pay excise duty, you pay so much duty. So in my estimate, for a Kenyan who earns 100 shillings at the beyond 44 shillings, he pays about 62% of that back to the government.
That's a lot.
It's a lot, yes.
Exactly.
It's a lot. We are among the highest tax countries in the world. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
Even Belgium, because they'll be taxed on what you call on their income, but the rest of the taxes are much lower than we do here. And I'm not writing that. I'm not questioning that. I'm saying tax us as much, but make sure that you stop wastage,
Yeah.
so that money can be used for the purpose for which it is meant to be used.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you're just joining us, I am talking with Steve Quay and Alex Mwathi, economist, financial analyst, a business leader here as well. And we're talking about the tough economic times in Kenya. And Alex, you began with a very interesting statement saying, which crisis? And I'm sure there's people watching at home like, life must be good for you then. Or what did you mean by that? Because, you know, there's a lot of people who are at home right now because they don't have a place to go to as far as an employment space, right? And so they're sitting at home. Others maybe are trying to get a business off the ground. So, you know, when you say what crisis, they might just wonder, which world are you living in?
The issue is the world is changing. Now, the world is changing at a very fast rate. And unfortunately, for those of us who are not changing as quickly as the world is changing, then it becomes a crisis every single day. Say, for example, the people we've been seeing what you're quoting, media quoting, banks laying off workers because there are no jobs for them. And the statement that you guys, the media people, say is that 100 people laid off, 1,000 people laid off. But the question is, why were they laid off? The reason is that there's a digital disruption in that business. And when you lay off 1,000 employees of, for argument's sake, the combination of banks, you create about 25,000 jobs in agency. Quoting one of the biggest bank I was listening to the other day, they used to have 1,000 ATM machines in the country. ATM machine is a robot. Nobody maintains it. They have reduced that to about 400, and everybody is griping that their service has gone down. But guess what? They have created 45,000, agents.
Agents meaning?
The banking agents,
Okay.
where you can withdraw money and draw money. It's similar to the Safaricom agents. And what that means that you and I, as a Kenyan, we need to start thinking. And I know it's not an easy task, because we like sitting back and complaining and griping. We need to find out if there's a disruption in this whatever I'm doing, what else do I need to do? There's always something else that you can do in life. And if you put your lot of effort and passion in that which that you want to do, then that thing will work for you. But if we sit back and wallow at the point where, I remember in 1990 when computers were introduced in the bank. You guys are younger, so you not know that in the olden days, all banks used to maintain a ledger where you went and filled in your details. When you want to withdraw, they opened your page and did the writing. Did you meet that? I don't think you did. So the banks introduced computers, I think, in 1990. There was a lot of hullabaloo. Forget about what you're talking about, financial crisis. Those is even a worse crisis, because we're saying that all employees of the banks will be dismissed. What has happened over time? More people have been employed, because then you have a whole chain of suppliers, maintenance people who do everything. That is where we need to focus our minds on a positive end of this stick.
Yeah.
What do I do as an individual? And he mentioned about budget, which is critical, that you've got to be prepared for that difficult time. But then when that difficult time hits you, do you stop or do you find alternatives?
Yeah. Steve, talk to us about preparing for those difficult times, much like the ones we find ourselves in today. What are some of the things as individuals we should be setting aside and doing?
First off, the moment you get employed, you should have that mental twitch that I'm supposed to have at any 1.6 times my gross income. In my
any
account.
one point.
At any one point.
6 times your gross, not
income,
your net.
not your net, your gross income. So that if you're laid off, then you're able to survive 6 months without changing your lifestyle. But then that calls for you cutting your expenses.
Yeah.
You have to budget. Like, for example, if you're doing your groceries, you need to buy things that can last you like a quarter of a year, things that are not perishable. So that gets you time to think and strategies and know what you want to do with the remaining amounts. Secondly, you want to do jobs that get you passive income. While you're employed, try to think of things that would get you income without you being part of them. You can start a logistics company, get a motorbike, get a rider. In that manner, you've created employment, but you're generating also income. Being territorial about your money. We don't borrow each other if you're friends. We help each other grow. I have a pal who tells me if I want a G from him, he'll tell me, Kwebana, whatever God is doing in your life, I cannot interfere with that. If he wants you broke at this point, be broke.
Wow, your
Yes.
friends are savage.
But they model you. They model you.
Wow.
Yeah. So
So your friends won't loan you any money?
no. We don't borrow each other. We grow each other. We come up with ideas
Okay.
and work on those ideas. If I have an idea, they will come with the money.
Okay.
If they have an idea, we will look for the money.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Are your friends like that too?
They are not that savage.
Are
but is a very strong, is a very critical principle that when you do that, it's almost like incest, you know, among friends. So yes, the best friends are people who make you get ideas or move the ideas you have forward.
Yeah.
And in fact, one of the key things that everyone needs to realize that you've got to keep 5 friends that challenge you. Your top friends must be people who challenge you. And if you don't have any that challenge you, you just drop that list and create a new one. And if you are the smartest in your group, which means you can borrow from everybody, it's time to move out of that group. Just look for another group that can challenge your mind continuously.
What do
And
you
yes,
say
and yes,
to
is
the-
and yes, is very important for you to realize that the only way to move forward and not to find yourself in crisis is to ensure that you live within your means.
True.
Yeah.
Today what happens is that a young man, like, he gets employed or starts a business, and the first thing he does is to look at the car I'm driving and want to drive it today. It's taken me 20 years to drive that car. You want to drive it today. Unless you rob a bank, like those young men who are trying to rob 72 million. It's going to, there are principles of life
Yeah.
that you must take your time. Yeah.
It's very interesting because, you know, as soon as we get employed, and it's really a mental game, but we feel that liberation for, oh, now I have money, now we live, you know, the way we want to. But, you know, as per Steve's challenge, it's actually, it's huge, because you're actually saying restrict yourself, restrict your perceptions and your desires to just live this flossy life. Do you agree about the whole 6 months?
100%. You've got, okay, 6 months, a bit a stretch, but it's a good principle.
Yeah, if you can,
I'm not questioning it. But for me, the critical thing is to ensure that whatever your salary is, if you earn 20,000, 10% of that must be on future investment for future growth. 10% must be put aside.
Let's talk about the difference between, there's some who say set aside 10% for savings and another 10% for investment. Are you using them
Yes. The
interchangeably here?
10% is the one for investment and then 10% for saving.
So with the salary, whichever amount,
Whichever
someone
amount
should
you
be
earn,
aiming to
you
do
can
that.
do that. You can do that. But if you keep in your mind that you want to live in a certain way, because what happens is that you must have this amount of money. You know that 20% will be done for those 2 items. You all have only 80% to spend on anything else that you want to spend. If you set, if you're earning 50,000, that can be very difficult. Very, very difficult. I want to tell my listeners, if you want 1 million shillings, that's also very difficult.
Yeah.
Is a mindset, is a thinking that you must put inside, that knowing that there will be a future, there might be a crisis. Because a time like this, when people are, you're talking about a crisis and people are being laid off, the people who are going to stay on and they'll be laid off 10 years from now when there will be no crisis. In our minds, there will be no crisis. So hence, it's up to everybody to prepare themselves. And I keep telling people, you can't eat everything that you earn. You'll never grow.
Yeah. We have a lot of questions coming in on this topic, and I'm going to be tackling them with my guest in a few. I have questions here about, if I have a salary of this much, how can I live with it? Or food expenses, why are they so expensive? Lots of people commenting about greed and whatnot. I'm going to be reading a lot of this feedback when we come back from this short break. Stay tuned. This is Full Circle with Joyce. Hey everyone, welcome back to Full Circle with Joyce, with me, Joyce Omondi Wahiga. And of course, when we began the show, I was letting you know about some of the news highlights. Someone here has commented on that story about teachers, and you say teachers are becoming greedy. Actually, I don't think that's possible. That's Mikandegwa watching us from Nyandara, Olkalawa. Asante sana. Irene Kendi tuned in from Mombasa. You say, good morning, Joyce, looking good as always. You're happy for the new week and tuned in for the end because you really need tips to start your business. So you tuned in until the end with us. Asanteni sana. And of course, tips on starting your business is coming up in our second hour at 9 a.m. But let me also turn to our question, on our viewpoint today, and look at some of your feedback on this. We're talking about the economic times in Kenya. How are you how are you coping with things? Mara sijui petroli imepanda bei, tena sijui ni nini, mafuta sijui maziwa. It's just been it's becoming harder and harder to plan around the times and the tides of this country. And that's what I think my guests are really emphasizing, that you really have to be able to chart your own path and think about it in advance. But to some of the questions that we have coming in, a lot of people feel that Kenya is now probably one of the most expensive places to live in, and we've seen that also with the housing survey. But of course, those prices are beginning to depreciate. But what would you say is, as far as just the cost of living in Kenya in comparison to even other East African countries and the region? Because for one, Kamau Gitari wa Tumaini says, hey Joyce, hii Kenya tutahama haki. No one is caring about the common mwananchi. Pesa ndio hiyo, hakuna siasa ndio hiyo. You're watching us from Tumaini, Nyandara County, hapa Venus Kinyozi. So Kamau Gitari ahamia wapi?
Akae hapa. Akae hapa.
Akae hapa.
Akae hapa. Kasi hajatoka, akae hapa.
Okay.
Yeah.
But talk to us about, the cost of living in Kenya. Is this something in our minds relative to all these economic terms you guys are telling us about? Is it sort of normal? It's just that there's misallocation and misuse of funds?
I think when you get money, you just need to equate your needs. For you to find that life is hard means that most of the time you're living slightly beyond your means, or over and above your means, or you're under influence, you're under pressure. Like for example, if I live somewhere in say along Thika Road, in say a 2-bedroom house, and they pay say 20,000. Somebody lives on Ngong Road and pays same 2-bedroom houses and pays 25 or 35 Gs. We are different, yes. But it would cost me a little more time. I just need to wake up early so that I'm in time, because them they're trying to say at Ngong Road to town is the distance is shorter, and Thika Road is longer. So it's a matter of planning. Just get your figures right, know what you want, and work towards that. Because then again, if we keep running away from this country, who are we going to live here?
Alex, have you ever thought about Hamia in Kenya?
No, the reality is that in my engagements, I travel to quite a good number of countries in Africa and the rest of the world. And the issues that we haggle with are in most of those countries. The only difference is that in terms of leadership, we have a situation where we have a leadership that we put in place, that we supported, that we fought for, that we kill each other for, that we, and then we are complaining about them because we didn't think we were putting up in leadership, and then the whole business, what you're talking about, the waste that is there. But I'd like to say this, that the reality is, yes, this inflation has been there, because you can't deny it. The inflation has been there. And what it behoves on each one of us is what I'd said earlier, that you've got to reach a point where you take responsibility for our lives. Those things that we can change, we have a time plan, we have a timetable. We can't change government, those people making policies and leadership decisions until 2022, unless we want to do a revolution tomorrow. I don't advocate for that, because it messes you much more than making it right. But until then, let's manage our system. I think the young people say, bora uhai. We have to manage our situation between now and then.
Okay, okay. So speaking about living within our means, because that's something both of you have emphasized throughout the show so far. Someone here says, hey Joyce, loving the show. I wanted to ask, if I'm earning a salary of 40K, how do I live according to that? How do I balance my rent and everything? So maybe this will point to, you know, any sort of rules of thumb of how to split your expenses and how much money, how much percentage, I guess, to devote to each of your different needs.
You want to go?
No pressure. 40,000, of course, is that net or gross?
It's a salary of 40K, so let's
40,000.
assume it's gross.
So I'm assuming 30% has gone. And that's 12,000. So this guy is left with 20,000. So ideally, this guy is not supposed to even there try living beyond, as in a house that would cost more than 8,000.
Don't live in a house more than 8,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because then again, now he'll be living to pay the rent if
Okay.
he lives beyond that. Then, like I said, bulk shopping. Things that are perishable, those you can do regularly. But then things like flour, rice, sugar, the things you can buy in bulk, and then they give you time to plan with the other 28,000 for the subsequent 2 months. You can really plan nicely. Look at your transport. When it's peak, how much do you guys pay? Then put that aside. Don't touch it. If you have to go out, please go out inside your house. As in, just go buy whatever you want to go do outside there. Come use it in your house.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alex, what would be your response to this?
Rule of the thumb would be this, that 10% you must put aside is a discipline that you must start creating. And people struggle with
saving.
this.
Yeah.
For long term, for investment, whatever you want to call it. 10% is for saving, for immediate, whatever else you need to do that. Of the net that you get. So 10% goes for long-term investment, 10% for short-term investment, whatever you may need to do, and about 30% for your house rent. Don't live beyond that. 30% of that, and then the rest now you can arrange within your expenditures. The problem is that nobody sets the saving, nobody sets this. So you are earning 70,000 and you go to a bank and take a car loan. And I'm thinking at that salary you shouldn't be driving a car. And it is okay, there will come a time when you can drive a car and you will drive a good car.
True.
if you're keen. What happens, Joyce, and I think this is the most important thing, for those people that are employed, what you do with your private life reflects in your job. So that if you are prudent and organize yourself in terms of how you use your money, you'll always have some money. So you'll not keep going back to your employer asking for advances. And that means that you have more time to think about his work. When you have more time to think about his work, then you're passionate about the job you do. If you're passionate about the job you do, you get promoted. If you get promoted, then your income grows.
But what do we say to the ones who have the burden of taking care of their families, right? So they're the ones who've come to Nairobi, their whole village is expecting Wewe ndio Okoko, the big city, you know, send us something back. Maybe they're taking care of their parents, they have school fees. So they're living beyond their means, but it's not frivolous. Do you know what I mean? How do we address that?
Taking responsibility for your life means that you have to consider everything that you have to do. But taking responsibility requires you to take care of that within your means. If you're earning 40,000, that's the means you have. And given 20% and 30%, 50%, so the rest of 50%, organize it accordingly. And do that. Because there's a time that will come if you do that, that your employer, wherever you're working, they will see the passion and the need, and they will be able to grow you. Then your salary will go to 100,000. Then your needs, you remember the same principle, 10%, 10%. But now you notice that 50% of 100,000 is much more money. You're able to take care of them. If you don't have a job, what will happen to them? That's what you must always ask yourself. If I lose this job or I become a vagabond in Nairobi, what will they do? Nothing. So manage within the means that you have.
Okay.
It should never be pressure on you from friends or from wherever else what you must do. Do it within your means.
Okay. We need to wrap up the show, and so let me just give you both a chance very briefly to make some closing statements of the one thing you would want our audience members to walk away with today following this discussion. Let's start with you, Steve.
One is fear of dying young, and there's fear of overstaying. So you need to plan for that, as Alex says. Keep saving. Save, because that's the only way you pay yourself. Yeah. we can always do this off the grid.
Okay.
Am I allowed to give my email
Yeah.
address? My email address is kwe@agentsteve.co.ke. That's kwe@agentsteve.co.ke. We can pick this conversation off the grid.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right. And what about you, Alex?
The simple thing is taking responsibility for our lives. There's that we can do, there's that we cannot do. But good news is that God allows us to be able to do everything. And if we don't plan today, we plan to fail in future. So which means that if I don't take my responsibility right now in terms of what I have and how I spend it and how I use it, then the future will not be good for me. Let me just say this, that 70% of the population in Kenya today is estimated to be people who are under the age of 35. Which means as we go to 2022 and we are going to elect a new government, just remember, if you are young and you are in your 40 and below,
We
you're
hold the power.
responsible. You have the power to change. So stop griping on Facebook, stop griping social media about government, about all those things. Take responsibility and look among yourselves, somebody who can lead us where you want us to go. It is possible to elect a president who is 40 years in 2022. I think JFK was 42 when he was elected. Why can't we do it in Kenya?
Okay.
And we have the numbers to do that. If you don't plan today to do that in 2022 and you still continue in the politics of 500 shillings, we will have a crisis continuously.
Yeah. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us here today, for your comments and your sentiments on this issue. For those of you who've been watching and sending in your feedback, asanteni sana as well. I think just to sum this up, really, life is tough everywhere. Yeah, so hata kama tunahama, ukienda hata Uganda, Tanzania, hata US, maisha bado ni magumu. And so at the end of the day, it's like the gentlemen here have said, it's about us taking responsibility for our own lives. What is it that you have in your hand and how are you using it best? Asanteni once again. With that said, we're going to get ready for our second hour. And today, of course, we're talking about personal development. As I did mention, today we want to talk about personal branding. But later on, we're going to talk to you about how to start off your own business. So, you know, we've been talking about savings and investment. If you've been doing that already for some time and you've had a really good idea on your hands, perhaps this will be a time to start that. But we're going to show you how to go about it. This and much more right here on Full Circle with Joyce. Stay tuned.